What are some of the red flags you see for dating when it comes to both men and women?
Psychological stability is probably the biggest one.
But take someone that's psychologically unstable. Does that mean that they're unfit for a relationship? How do they fix that? There has to be some sort of solution.
Well, they can self-regulate, right? There's no reason that the person who's psychologically unstable, I'm not saying like, oh, if you're psychologically unstable, you're unworthy of a relationship. Like, that's not my point.
Mm-hmm.
But what I am saying is...
They're ready once they stabilize?
Well, no. Like, I mean, dude, people, again, the Michelangelo effect, like people get into relationships all the time. It's not that they're not going to get into a relationship. It's just going to be painful for the person on the other side of it and probably them as well.
Right, but then you take a psychologically unstable person, and what does that mean for them in their dating life? Does that mean that they will just continue to get involved in toxic relationships? Or how do they like recognize the fact maybe that they should stabilize? Like, are we saying psychologically unstable as though they're just not mature enough to stabilize that?
It's just, how long does it take them to get back to baseline?
Right, but let's take someone that takes a long time to get back to baseline. So they're not psychologically stable.
If you are the person that's choosing, I would move on. That's what I would say. Unless you are like, I'm head over heels with this person. I can't, like, there's just everything else about them is so great that I can't not see them as this phenomenal human being. Maybe that's the person for you. I've got an interesting study here that I want to take you guys through. Researchers polled over 1,000 registered US voters aged 18 to 34. A majority of both women and men consider far-rightism and far-leftism to be red flags in a potential partner. 76% of women and 59% of men consider identifying as a MAGA Republican to be a major turnoff. 64% of men and 55% of women said they'd also swipe left on someone identifying as a communist. 55% of women said that listening to Joe Rogan was a red flag, 35% for men. 41% of women said the same for a woman being into astrology, 20% of women. 33% of men say Black Lives Matter, 14% for women. 53% of women they refuse to see the Barbie movie, 31% for men. So basically, there are lots and lots of very arbitrary rules that people are putting in place about dating. It's like they listen to Joe Rogan, whatever, 50% of women say that that's a red flag. The real ones are psychological stability. For me, I think a very important one is, how much do they value intrinsic versus extrinsic reward? So like, are they doing something because they want to be seen by other people? They want to gain status. They want the adoration and the validation of the crowd, versus how much they just want to do things with you for their own reason. Like, do they want you to be on their arm as the guy or the girl so that they can show you off to everyone else? Or do they want to be with you in private because they just love your company? Like, those are two huge, huge predictors. And you can go down, oh, does body count matter? And like, what's the level of, like, actually one other one that I think is almost like universally agreed on is, what are their core values? Like, you can have two people with the same values and different interests that get into a great relationship. If you don't have the same values, it's almost impossible, because you're permanently going to be coming into conflict.
What sorts of values?
Political ideology would be one.
But isn't a political ideology on top of your value system? So like the value system.
It's born out of the value system though, right? Like if you...
But it could be misguided.
It could, but then you're going to have to be like, hey, have you ever considered that your far leftism isn't actually what you believe? And you're basically rehabilitating this person. My belief around dating is that you meet the person where they are. If this person has got amazing raw materials and you think, I am pretty convinced that I can turn this person into the sort of person that I want them to be, and they're not that far off, fantastic. But if you see someone and you're just like, they're hot, but crazy, and I mean, it's a meme. I can fix her. I can fix her. It's a fucking super meme, because people know that on average, it's not true. Like, I think meet people where they're at. Like, try and find someone. They don't have to be the finished article. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. But you have to see something in them where you're like, yeah, this is good. Dude, if you marry somebody, you have strong political views and their political views don't align with yours, you're in for a rough ride. You're in for a really rough ride, because it's born out of your values. It's like, what do you think about the sanctity of life? Like, let's say that someone gets pregnant. Like, you're literally going to have that argument front and center. At least if you guys both agree, you're not going to have that conflict on top of what is already a pretty like difficult conversation that you're going to have about what's going to go on. And the same thing goes for literally everything else in your life. Like, do we think that our kids should go to private school or be homeschooled? Like, that's something that's pretty important. What do we think about child rearing? What do we think about gender roles in the household? What do we think about breadwinners? What do we think about financial goals? What do we think about that? Like, all of these things are born out of your values. And if you've got value alignment, pretty much everything else, psychological stability, all the rest of the stuff, as long as you've got those things, you can usually work through most of the other stuff. But if you haven't got those and you're just like, we both like playing pickleball, good luck.
Now, it seems like from that study, a lot of it really comes down to someone's agreeableness or disagreeableness. And I know you talked about this in another podcast where people want someone who's malleable in the middle, where you're not going to hold these extremely firm beliefs either way. And it's more about the person being able to see the perspective of another side.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this for men and women comes down to whether or not they're disagreeable and they're going to be difficult in a relationship?
Well, don't forget, disagreeability can be sexy, right? Like, disagreeability it's like pushback. That's what flirting is kind of a little bit about, right? Like, someone doesn't quite fold to what you want. And they go, no, you do it. It's like, oh, right. Okay. That's kind of, there's something exciting about that. In my experience, guys will tend to have an easier time with women who are agreeable. Like, if every single thing that you do is a battle to like, why don't we go here for dinner? I don't want to go there. So, okay, why don't we go there for dinner? Oh, I don't want to go there. I guess you're just going to choose everything. It's like, okay, why don't you choose? I'm not, like, you want me to choose? That is just the predisposition of certain people, right? And the same can be true in reverse as well. If every single thing that you do with your partner is a battle, if every single thing that you do is a war, it's not fun, right? Conversely, if that person is so placid that they always just fold to whatever your desires are. Where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Oh, I don't care. What do you want to do tomorrow? Oh, you choose. Like, why don't we do this thing? Yeah, sure. Like, give me something here. Because if someone is permanently just agreeing with what you say, it's basically the same as not being in a relationship with anybody. So again, as with everything, it's like, where's this nice spectrum that's in the middle? Now, there's some people that prefer Jeffrey Miller, evolutionary psychologist. He's married to Diana Fleischman. Diana is like one of the most disagreeable people. Like, she is a self-identified like female tetrad. So like dark triad, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. Although I don't know how much she's got on the narcissism, but she's like kind of waved her finger in the air a little bit and been like, yeah, like I'm pretty high on psychopathy. I'm like, wow, like but that's what Jeffrey likes. Jeffrey likes the fact he's got this really high IQ, quite disagreeable woman that he like contends with. Right? He contends with his wife, but that's because of him. Like, he's this like even like more crazy IQ, like super smart dude. So that's what he's about. But I would say on average, like, especially agreeable women seem to be like, my friends that are in relationships with them seem to have like an easier time. And it's that if everything is a battle for all of the decisions that you have to make, not very much is fun. You're always working pretty hard to try and just get the smallest thing across the line. You want to have battles about the big stuff, not about all of the stuff. That's literally just being in a war. And that doesn't sound good.